Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I am super excited to talk today. Joe Kevens is the founder of B2B SaaS Reviews. Did I say that right?
That's right. Yep.
That's right. Okay, good. So this guy is the absolute guru of B2B SaaS reviews, which is a huge topic. And I was lucky enough to stumble on your research, Joe. You also are the director of demand gen, if I'm right, at Partnerstack. So you
That's
actually
right.
are doing this and keeping up your commitments there. It's amazing. Joe, how did you become so interested in B2B SaaS reviews?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks for having me. For me, it goes back and it kind of ties into your world with sales development. My first job in software was actually back at Eloqua in 2011. And at the time, and this is even like 10 plus years ago, working as an inbound SDR, what I found was the best leads were the ones that were coming through software advice or looking at an analyst report, like a Gartner Magic Quadrant. And that was the first kind of light bulb moment early on about, like as a vendor, the buyer doesn't really fully trust me in what I'm saying. They want to see what does the expert analyst have to say, and then what do kind of the peer reviews have to say. And then since then, I transitioned into a marketing role and I started kind of working demand gen at sales-led companies. So I was always in that kind of marketing, assisting sales side of the business. And over the years, I ended up doing a stop at a company called Influitive, which is customer marketing and advocacy. And they're big on the review space. And, they would find these really interesting data points about that would survey broadly where people trust in institutions, companies. Where do they basically turn for information? Who do they trust? And the trend over the last 10 years has been kind of a steady decline in companies, and people are turning more and more to people they know. So you're seeing things like communities, relationships. But with reviews, it's, they're basically seeing it as a way to turn to their peers and say, like, okay, I'm not going to put as much faith in the marketing and sales claims of the vendor. I'm going to see what people like me, people I can relate to, have experience with this product. So, and then, in my, demand gen role, I've always kind of also worked on reviews as a way to kind of basically lay a foundation of demand creation and capture for companies that, more and more people, as you talked about on one of your previous episodes, that stat we hear often about how the buying process today, 60, 70, whatever percent, but a lot of that percent before they engage with the buyer, they're turning to third parties, review sites, communities, peers. So for me, it's kind of, it's just become so integral to the way people buy, both in the consumer world, but now increasingly more and more in the B2B world too. So, in COVID times, I don't know, I had a kid and I started thinking longer term, what do I want to do? And I found that, this was like a business passion of mine to really think about the role reviews play now. And that's where I really went deep on the content on the site, why they matter, where to get reviews, and then how to go out and get them.
Yeah, and reviews are such a part of our lives. I mean, we use it from a B2C perspective constantly, and now in B2B, it's so much more trusted. But how did you go from thinking about reviews and then sitting down and writing your initial opus, about
Yeah.
getting it out of your head and onto paper?
Yeah. I think part of it was, the last few years working in jobs where it was, as a demand gen marketer, part of my job to go get reviews. And as you're doing that, it seems pretty straightforward. We need reviews, we ask some customers, but then along the way, you kind of realize the nuance and some of the decisions you have to make about, oh, actually, there's, a dozen places we can get reviews. how do I prioritize them? Like, which ones should I start with? Should I just focus on one, or should I diversify, go for a few? So I found like my online search for this kind of information, you could find it from the review sites themselves. But then I didn't really see, I saw an opportunity or maybe a gap for something that was review site agnostic. So the initial thought was, what about a review site that isn't like covering the review sites from a point of view that isn't a review site itself? So there'd be a little less bias. So that was kind of where I started with, where it's like the lay of the land of, here are the review sites you need to know in the B2B space. Here's how they differ. Here's the use cases, who should use them, etc. But then from there, with a sales and marketing background, just always kind of wanting to start with the problem or kind of the why, like why we even bother with reviews in the first place. So that was where I was like, okay, let's really step way back and think about this and go deep. Like, let's do this once, but do it properly. Why do reviews matter? The whole buying process, how it's changing. And then that's kind of how I started from there. And then now it's just all about building on it and getting probably more and more tactical as I go.
Yep. And it's almost like you're an analyst of the review space, which I don't think I've ever bumped into before. And it seems like really ripe for analysis of reviews, and there's a lot of companies involved in reviews. There's a lot of people. People have different opinions about reviews and whether they're to be trusted themselves or not. I mean, there's a lot to look at with this topic, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and I think no one's covered it because I don't know if there's any money in it, to be honest. Like, if I'm being completely candid, like, to play my role right now. So I think that might be one of the reasons why there's a gap. I mean, I work with the review sites, but not in any sort of commercial capacity. So, yeah, I think there was an opportunity there, but yeah, I mean, the review sites, they kind of, in the B2B space, when the main players started out 10 years ago, they kind of firmly stated that the analysts were kind of the enemy and that they were the problem, and review sites were going to fix that, where instead of it being one or two expert opinion where they'd publish a report every like once a year, they were going to go out and get a steady flow of user reviews, kind of democratize the whole process. So yeah, there was certainly no, I don't think, analyst coverage of the review sites until some of Gartner has kind of got now into the review site game itself with Gartner Digital Markets, and then now Gartner Peer Insights for the enterprise market. So yeah, I think there's a bit of a gap I'm trying to cover with it. So yeah, hoping more and more people kind of stumble upon it like you and find value in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you do make me think. This is 10 years ago. The I won't say who said it, but they said they were going to take the magic out of the magic quadrant and democratizing it. Fast forward to today, and everybody's got a magic quadrant. It's just a box, and the one who said that is actually got a magic quadrant that's dynamic, based on the number of reviews that they have. So, I'll take that with a grain of salt. It's interesting because there's a bit of distrust of analysts because you don't know, for some reason, their biggest clients and the ones who are like sponsoring their conferences and stuff are the ones that are up and to the right all the way in their floor box. I don't know what happens behind the scenes. It's kind of a smoky room. But then you go to the review sites, and it's essentially, it's repeating itself. They're the same ones. So how do you sift through, and trust the sites when they're trying to make money just like any other business?
I think that's the major question, and I think they're all working through that, trying to grapple with it. I think as whenever you have that financial interest there, it's hard to achieve full trust. And I think that's why you're seeing people turn more and more to communities and their peers directly, because they want to just know what's the honest truth. Like, don't try to sell me anything here. Like, you know, give it to me straight. So I think like the review sites, I think where they like give credit where it's due is, they have taken it from being just one or two people that are doing it kind of on an infrequent basis to saying, there's now millions of B2B SaaS reviews in the last 10 years. It's crazy to think like, just 10 years ago that didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And then, for a lot of people, they want to find people like them that have used the product, relatable people, same context, same role. And with the explosion of all the tech out there, I think the reality is most people just don't have the network to know someone who's actually used the product. So they don't really have the luxury of saying like, I'm just going to go turn to my friend who I know has used this and he or she can kind of give it to me straight. It's kind of, it's not ideal, but I think a lot of people still, like the data will show, still turn to search, still go to review sites, still want to see what the peers have to say. And the B2B review sites, also to their credit, unlike consumer spaces where it's pretty much like you write a review, it gets posted, and unless someone complains or there's some sort of AI detection that it's fake, it's up there. A lot more issues with authenticity and fake reviews. But the B2B software review sites, they all have validated processes where to write a review, you have to prove that you're a user. Usually it's like show a screenshot of you logged in, manually verified each one. So I think there's a lot more integrity with the reviews that are out there in the B2B space. And, I think the room's a little less smoky because, with the analysts, there's that long-term relationship building with one or two people, maybe some wining and dining and, paying for the certain programs. Review sites, they don't really have that. They've got their algorithm for how they kind of rank vendors. So it's more so about the vendor influence of kind of people gaming the algorithm more so, where it's like they're kind of seeing like, okay, this is how it works. Ask any CEO what they want to see on a review site, and it's usually I want to see my company rank as high as possible. So there is a little bit of that mistrust there, where it's like, are these really the companies that are the highest reviewed, most popular, or are they the ones that kind of know how to play play to the algorithm best, right? And I think on social, you'll see a lot of people speak to the negatives because it plays well, just to kind of fully criticize them. But in my opinion, I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, right? Where it's like they're still highly valuable, still a good shortcut for deciding how to make a short list, how to decide which vendors you're going to spend your time with. You had said on a previous episode, like no one's got time for 27 demos, but you need a way to figure out like who are the 3 or 4 I'm going to spend time with. Review sites still are quite effective at that, to try to narrow down the field and get a sense of who should I really narrow my search on and spend the time on.
Well, you mentioned it. I think that the buyer journey has changed a lot, and you touched on this. And we as you go through as the director of demand gen, and you identify a problem, do you follow that research process and go through the same process that you're sort of describing that people go through these days?
Yeah, I mean, I personally still turn to search frequently and use these review sites and kind of scan them and try to make sense of my options. But I think like most buyers, it's not the silver bullet. It's not just relying on review sites, right? It's also turning to your peers and communities. It's also your own past experience. And also, we've been criticizing the analysts, but, depending on your use case, sometimes they like a good analyst that knows the space. And especially if you're more of an enterprise buyer, there's value there too. And I think, kind of use a combination of those. So yeah, I think to me it's still very valuable. I mean, you see the odd post from marketing thought leaders out there that will just say like, oh, the review sites are kind of thing of the past because of some of these issues they're working through. But I think if you like all the web traffic data that you can get on the review sites, and personally as a director of demand gen, just firsthand seeing the data, I think like at Partnerstack, 40% of our buyers will look at review sites in that process. And quite a few will actually discover us there. So, it's, to me, it's still very, very integral to the whole process.
Yeah, it almost seems like it's just beginning now, even though it's been going for 10 years plus. It's still
exactly.
fresh. And until I can order, I have one of those little Amazon things that you talk to. I'm not going to say her name because she's right there. Until you can say, "Hey, Amazon, what's the best B2B, data provider?" And the AI goes out and finds the exact one that's perfect for you. We're not quite there yet, so there's still some research that has to take place, and even close, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, there's context and use cases. Another episode I was listening to, I think you mentioned, if you're a startup SMB, like you probably don't want to hone in on the top right in the quadrant vendor, because they're probably out of your price point. So you kind of also have to play with those filters as well and kind of know what type of solutions best for your needs.
It's so true. And so this is, going back to how I discovered you, if someone's either on the demand gen side or potentially using review sites, where's a good place to start with learning about this whole process from the research that you've done?
I think if you're a demand gen marketer, I think each of the review sites have a lot of educational resources to help you out. I think what I've attempted to do with B2B SaaS reviews is kind of be that jump off point, if you will, where it's, if you need to know you're in B2B SaaS, here are 10 sites, the top 10 review sites, most common, most popular ones. See which ones kind of fit your needs the most, because they do differ, right? Like if you're targeting SMBs and you're a B2B marketer with a paid budget, maybe you want to work with Capterra, where you can basically bid your way to rank highly, and it's a pay-per-click model, and it's very black and white with the math about you pay X for a lead and then see if you can make more than that with revenue. Whereas something like G2, it's that's not an option. It's a bit more of either a brand play to kind of show up more often in search, or it's to kind of influence your buyer when they're looking at reviews wherever they are in the process, and then basically subscribing to their intent data. So you kind of know which companies are looking into your category, so you can proactively get sales and marketing messages to them. So it kind of depends where you need to go. I think I always recommend people on the demand gen side would start with search, because I think search is still very, very important in the buyer journey. So put in best insert your category and see who bubbles to the top. That's probably a good starting point. Because if you're in the B2C space, the review site's going to be completely different than the B2B space. So there's no, these are the 3 review sites everyone's got to focus on. You kind of have to figure out for your own space which ones are the ones that kind of show up the most.
So interesting, because I almost see your website becoming the review site for review sites.
Oh yeah, it's a little meta like that.
It's a meta
in a way. Yeah.
It's a coffee table book about coffee tables. But it's there's, again, like I said, there's so much energy in the sector, and there's so many review sites, and there's so many people that are interested in this. and there's no analyst, who's the god of review sites. So, anyways, that's just me getting.
I was uncomfortable with Guru. Now really uncomfortable with God. A guy that knows a little bit about reviews. That's
You're
all.
getting
I'm Canadian.
promoted
I gotta be modest. Yeah.
throughout the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. So, and what's next for your research and your site? Now, as you're thinking of, how do I expand this, or how do I, become more useful to people? Where do you see this going?
So yeah, I think I spent a couple of years, what I would say, like kind of describing what's already out there, but kind of summarizing it. What I've been working on the last few months was actually running a couple of survey reports to kind of um, add to what's known about online reviews in both the consumer space and the B2B space. So I just published those the other few weeks ago. So those are still fresh. I'm still kind of working on the rollout and promotion of that. Because I think there were some interesting findings in that, going back to your example about, no one's got time for 27 demos. They kind of narrow it down to three or four. One of the questions I asked both B2B and B2C buyers was, if you could go to a review site, how many vendors will you actually take the time to go through and read reviews about them? Because even reading reviews, going through 27 vendor profiles is a pretty tall task. So in both cases, most said somewhere between 3 to 5. So it's interesting to see, and this is part of the challenge with the review sites, where the review sites want to avoid any kind of vendor gaming. They want it to be the most honest, accurate representation of the vendors. But on the other hand, the vendors probably know if they're in a category with 200 vendors, if they're 150, that's not going to help. It's almost going to be a disservice. So first priority is, how do I kind of show up better? How do I kind of get in the ring and kind of get noticed? So yeah, I think it's just kind of rolling out some of those findings, so people that are on either side, demand gen or reviews, kind of have kind of a line of sight in that. And then yeah, from there, I think it's just kind of building more on the actual review content. There's still quite a bit to write, so kind of slowly dripping that out as best I can when I'm not doing the day job and the 2.5-year-old at home as a dad.
That doesn't take time.
No,
and I mean, those insights are so interesting. Is there a newsletter? I mean, what's the best way, if people are, as passionate about this as you, to stay on top of your research?
Yeah, they can subscribe. There is a newsletter. It's about every 2 to 4 weeks. So usually it's pretty content rich, but it's pretty infrequent. So, because I know there's probably a lot of people that have a general interest in this, but maybe not a deep dive kind of interest. So yeah, just trying to be mindful of that. But it is a good way to stay in touch with the research and work we're putting out.
Yeah. And we'll I've got a lot of ideas for this, but a good friend of mine, he's one of the top sales tech analysts. He's independent, and he makes a living on his newsletter subscriptions. So maybe you're giving it away for free, and you should be charging people. So just something to think about.
Yeah, maybe one day. Yeah, there's lots of people that are doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the only game in town, then it's just a simple supply and demand. There's nobody who knows as much. I'm doing it again, but there's nobody who knows as much about reviews as you, who doesn't work at one of the big review sites. So monetize that thing, man. So, anyways, that's my advice.
Food for thought. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, there you go. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your wisdom, and we'll make sure we'll put a link to the newsletter, and it's free for now, but get on there. Right. And to the site. So for all the other review nerds out there, we can go and geek out. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, David.